Well, we have a nice audience for you, Ari, today.
Appreciate it.
And listen, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you over the years. And you've had so many different business successes. And I appreciate you turning your brain to putting a lot of words on paper about some of the observations you've had over the years, especially some of the monopolies that started to gather in big tech. And I know your new book, Yield, is something that I know we're all interested to hear about. I imagine you can buy that book everywhere.
Pre-order on Amazon. It will be available on audiobook, but that's not available today. It'll be available in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. I'm sure we'll hear about it. And your Twitter handle is?
I think everyone knows.
All right. So listen, I want to open this up. And again, in the context of being a free-flowing conversation, let's really get behind, what inspired you to put the book together. Again, seeing Google in particular kind of start to evolve and start to gobble different parts of the marketplace. Like, when did this click and when it was like, I really need to write a book about this, even if it's just to get out of my own psyche?
No, that's a great question because that's exactly what happened. So I've been following the industry as a non-participant for the last couple of years since I sold my company.
Right.
And the biggest story really in ad tech over the last 10 years is Google's dominance. It really is. We don't talk about it because it's like the air. It's just there. And then what happened was there's a whole bunch of legal issues going on. Multiple antitrust cases, but the most important one was coming to trial very quickly in Virginia, the Eastern District, I think, in Virginia, in federal court, and it was going to trial. There was going to be, the usual courtroom drama, and I decided, I'd be an idiot to be sitting in New York following it from other people's reporting, right? This is my Roman Empire. I got to be there. Like, why? What am I doing if I'm not going there? I'm not busy, So I camped out in Virginia for about a month. I was in the pews taking notes on the trial, and during that process, first of all, it's fun. Yeah. The trials are. There's a reason why Law and Order is very popular.
Right.
Yeah. Dum dum. It's really boring too. They don't show the boring parts. That would be interesting. Law and Order injunctions or something. But what was interesting was that as the testimony went by, and literally every single witness is on my personal Christmas list. They're all my friends, and there was a lot of drama. There were people who were saying, they weren't just saying, header bidding is really bad. No, they were saying things like, they lied to me. I felt betrayed.
Wow.
I had to fire 200 employees because Google changed its algorithm. They have driven me and my friends out of business. Wow. That's what the testimony was. And it was a wide variety of people and saying this, and it was dramatic. And I said to myself, between that outcome, how did we get there? How do we get there? Because I don't think Google's an evil company. I don't think it could be. I could have written this book as don't be evil. They are evil, but it's not the case. Google's a very well-intentioned company, but well-intentioned people in certain environments can have this slippery slope towards doing things that are not in the best interest of their customers and of the industry. And that's really what happened here. It's a story of a slow slide into arrogant and in some cases destructive behavior.
Right. And so, as the concept of the book kind of unfolded, was there, some pressing themes outside of the good intentioned companies maybe kind of creeping into malevolence unintentionally? What was the corpus of it? Yeah, so the book effectively starts with the dawn of the exchange era, which you could think of as the financialization of advertising. And that was a technology innovation. Brian O'Kelly, I think, deserves credit as inventing the exchange, and then Google, DoubleClick had their own. And that's fine. Financialization was interesting, and it would have been an interesting story no matter what. But what happened was that as it became technologically enabled, the biggest and most advanced technology company dove in, and the second part of the theme is they ended up disrupting journalism and media in a way that was not entirely the fault of this financialization, but it helped, right? So if you had audiences moving away from hard news and moving eventually towards video and mobile and away from websites, that was going to happen
anyway.
Right.
But then having the advertising part that paid for everything also have a hand on the scale, pushing the whole time, was not great for anybody.
No, yeah.
Right.
The walls close in.
Yeah, the walls closed in, and you see it over this course of this effectively like a little less than 20-year period from the invention of the exchange in around 2006 through the antitrust trial in 2024 or 2025. That bookends the book, and that's really the story.
Yeah, right. Is there, so maybe fast forward to even today, like, what with all the research you've done, with all the kind of passionate testimony, with, creating this, again, now the court system is deemed to be certainly a monopoly. They have to kind of unravel. Like, where do you see it going? And kind of like, do you think there were any lessons learned? I mean, do you see this kind of creeping back into the original scape of being, the Dark Knight?
So I think that the argument against some of the antitrust activities is that it's yesterday's news, it's too late.
Yeah.
We can't fix it. And that may be true, but also not sufficient to say we shouldn't have prosecuted the case. Right. It might be the case that reversing things and spinning out Google's ad tech stack and regulating it is not going to bring back high CPMs from journalism, and it's not going to change the overall trajectory of what is colloquially called the open web. Right. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a good thing to prosecute this and potentially create competition in certain sectors that Google currently controls.
Right.
There's also a financial aspect of this. So people often ask, like, weren't publishers better off because Google invested so much?
Right.
Maybe. But you could also see the other side of the ledger, which is we'll do back of the napkin calculations. So AdX, it was disclosed during the trial, has about $10 billion in gross media.
Okay.
Biggest exchange by far, and that was a couple years ago, so it's probably a little bigger.
Right.
The AdX's take rate is almost exactly 20% because they have a list price of 20% and they don't discount at all because they're a monopoly. So they end up with the actual effective take rate of AdX is 19.98%.
Carry decimal point out.
I know, right? Okay, so what should the take rate be?
Right.
And so there was an economist who testified at the trial. He did this whole econometric analysis. He looked at all the other exchanges, and he kind of ballparked it should have been about 16%. Yeah. Okay, let's do back then. Yeah. So 4% overcharge times $10 billion a year. That's $400 million in overcharge against publisher income statements every year for 10 years. So that would make a little bit of a difference in journalism if that money was back.
Well, listen, I again, as the ad tech god, we know.
I am not ad tech god.
I love, again, following your posts and threads, and I think you make people think a little bit outside the box relative to like what can be kind of the day-to-day, sometimes monotony of kind of like grinding through, the businesses that we want to certainly expand on. And I say that because what other, as this book, again, I think the major takeaways are clear. Again, yield, buy it everywhere. What other kind of aspects, in our ad tech ecosystem, or what other themes are you seeing emerge? Like, can you give any kind of like counsel as to like what we should be watching for? Or what we should be excited about. I like taking both sides of that equation.
Right. I think one of the more interesting chapters I wrote, which was most of the book is really firsthand. So I interviewed people who had done things. Yeah. But in the middle of the book, I had to confront some bigger trends, and I did a lot of research on the trend back 2019 or so, where Apple, Facebook, and Google all created microformats for mobile.
Right.
AMP,
sure.
Apple News pages, and Facebook pages.
Right.
All three came out within 3 months of each other.
Wow.
And they all failed. And
I forgot how close it was.
Apple kind of came the closest, but they all failed for two reasons. One was they weren't advertising supported, so they were all bad for advertising.
Right.
And two is these tech companies were fickle and they were not interested in actually reading news. They were interested in supporting their platforms, and news was seen as a pawn.
Right.
And I think there's a real lesson there because everyone's going to act in their own interest, and it's great when these tech giants invest in something, and maybe you can ride the wave, but you have to be very cautious,
right?
Because they don't have your interest at heart.
So a cautionary tale on that.
That one was a very cautionary tale, and in retrospect, probably did more harm than good. That whole exercise for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I bet.
And Apple News is the only survivor of that era. And I think any publisher knows Apple News CPMs are not just half of regular CPMs; they're like a tenth.
Yeah.
Because they don't support cookies, obviously. But they also don't support header bidding. They don't support regular sizes. Like it's just an advertising wasteland. And I don't think that means advertising is a bad thing. I just mean it's like you really just can't trust the tech companies and put your eggs in their basket.
Well said. Okay, so that's certainly not only something that you observe, but also another, again, cautionary tale about how people like introduce new mediums, especially in the big tech companies. So let's leave on a positive note. What are you most excited about, to the extent you can be excited?
Well, I think that I've said this quite a bit, which is I think that when we talk about the open web, we're sort of using this shorthand that stopped being useful. Yeah. Because when I say the open web, or you say the open web, you're probably thinking of the New York Post and the Daily Mail and all these very journalism-heavy, web-heavy websites. And it is true that they're all pretty much declining for a lot of reasons that are not Google's fault.
Yeah.
But when you put on your advertising hat and you think not of the open web, but of what surfaces are there available for you to advertise on, that's actually increasing. So Spotify.
Yeah.
Spotify is not by anyone's definition of the open web, but it's a great place to advertise, and they're now enabling programmatic, and they're allowing new formats, and they're using AI. And there's retail media. There's ads in all kinds of places. Consumers were spending time that didn't have ads previously, now do. So if we think about our industry and our ecosystem, I can
barely find my Uber car now through all the ads.
I know, I had that problem yesterday. I was accidentally clicking on the ad because I wanted to figure out where my car was.
I don't want to buy a pizza
there's some
right
kinks,
now.
but I guess my general point is the programmatic advertising ecosystem, or what open to advertisers, is actually increasing.
It is, yeah.
The open web, which was probably peaked in the year 2000 or so, is declining, and it's unfortunate, but it's not the end of our industry by any means.
Yeah, right on. I think there's no electronic medium that's not going to offer advertising at any point. So
that's right.
Well, listen, this has been a real treat. I want to again reintroduce the book, Yield.
Pre-sale. Available. It ships on August 5th in the U.S. Outside the U.S., it's a little dicey. Audiobook will be available for pre-sale in a couple of weeks, but certainly before August 5th.
Well, it's a terrific read, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
All right. Thanks.